God directed the Israelites to tear down altars to Baal and cut down the wooden pillars representing Asherah. What precisely was it about these two false gods that Yahweh detested so very much? Of course, anything that comes between us and God is a problem, but God found these two idols particularly abhorrent. And actually, it's not so much the idols themselves God detested. They were nothing but powerless wood, clay, or bronze figurines. What God found despicable was what transpired during the worship of these two so-called gods, Baal and Ashera. A few years ago, anthropologists studying the Phoenician colony of Carthage, where Baal is known to have been worshipped, discovered some disturbing things about the people who lived there. Mothers and fathers had lovingly buried ashes of their children there in small urns, which is not unusual, but these were children they themselves had sacrificed to Baal. The practice was apparently highly distasteful even to Carthaginians. They hated sacrificing their children to Baal. So, you know what they did about it? They began to buy children for the purpose of sacrificing them, or even raising the children of their servants for this purpose, rather than offering up their own. In times of crisis or calamity, however, like war, earthquakes, drought, or famine, the priests of Baal demanded children to sacrifice. When the people of Carthage ran out of servant children, the priests demanded that they turn over their own to be ritually murdered to appease Baal. In special ceremonies held during these periods of extreme crisis, as many as 200 children of the most affluent and powerful families in Carthage were slain by being tossed alive into a burning pyre. In fact, on one occasion, 500 children were recorded as killed at the altar of Baal. On a moonlit night, a toddler, usually under the age of 2, was placed in the arms of an effigy of Baal. It was made of brass. The priests lit fires that heated this idol from below. The victims were placed on the burning hot, outstretched hands. As these innocents burned alive, they screamed in agony. The priests beat drums and sounded flutes, lyres, and tambourines, hoping to drown out their anguished cries so that, and I quote, a father might not hear the voice of his child and his mother's heart might not be moved. These were the human sacrifices practiced in the ancient rituals of the worship of Baal. This is what God detested. Afterwards, the remains of the children sacrificed were collected and placed in special clay urns. The urns were then buried at a memorial site. I read that recent excavations uncovered an area of over 1.5 acres with 9 different levels below ground filled with urns buried at this one site alone. What is truly perverse is that the ritual of burning a child alive was called the act of laughing, because when the flames consumed the tiny body, the child's limbs would thrash and contract, and his or her open mouth seemed almost to be laughing. Human sacrifice is the most horrendous of religious perversions practiced by the people the Israelites failed to drive out of Canaan when they occupied the Promised Land. You may recall that Abraham was prepared to sacrifice his promised son, Isaac, but an angel stopped him. You see, the only human whose sacrifice accomplished anything of value was the sacrifice of the Son of God. Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and you shall be saved. So that's why God detested Baal. What about Asherah? Why was the worship of this female goddess abhorrent to Yahweh? Well, Asherah's worship was a sexual fertility cult. Scholars believe that worshiping the goddess Asherah began as a primitive superstition meant to enhance the human reproductive act, but it quickly transgressed into religious prostitution. Jeremiah the prophet once wrote, "On every high hill and under every green tree you lie down like a prostitute." Hosea, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel all declared that this goddess made Yahweh jealous. It began when the Israelites failed to destroy or drive out the people living in the land promised them as God had instructed. So that is why these two false gods, Baal and Asherah, were particularly detestable to God. And the perverse activity associated with the worship of these two idols continues in our communities today. Pornography is so prevalent that our minds have become more or less numb to it. Today, any computer, iPad, or cell phone with internet connectivity has access to images once sold only in darkened backroom porn shops just a few years ago. It is true, our nation has experienced moral decay. We don't call it bowing down to Ashera, but it's the same effect. And what about Baal? What about child sacrifice? Surely no one is sacrificing the lives of children today, are they? Well, children are kidnapped or simply disappear on a daily basis in America. Teenagers are the ones most commonly abducted. In 2020, there were 178,747 male juvenile kidnapping cases in the U.S. The number of abducted girls was even higher, 209,375 reported cases. Some of these victims are sold into sexual slavery, drugged and prostituted for the profit of their abductors. As for child sacrifice, the murder of children, surely such a thing doesn't exist today, not in these enlightened times, right? Well, stop a moment and consider why children were sacrificed to Baal in ancient days. In times of great turmoil, the priests convinced people to believe that doing the unthinkable would preserve their well-being or even improve their lives, so they sacrificed their children. Today, the lives of unborn children are sacrificed for exactly the same reason. National Right to Life estimates that more than 63 million abortions have been performed in the United States since 1973. That's when abortion was legalized. 63 million. That's an average of 1.3 million per year, or 3,672 aborted babies every day for the last 47 years. Of course, that procedure is sometimes medically necessary to save the life of a mother, right? Well, as it turns out, almost never. It happens, yes, but statistically it is extremely rare. Former Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. C. Everett Koop, said, "The fact of the matter is that abortion as a necessity to save the lives of the mother is so rare as to be non-existent." Fact is, sacrificing a child who is not yet born is done for precisely the same reason children were sacrificed to Baal. During a time of great turmoil, the abortionist convinces people to believe that doing the unthinkable will preserve their well-being or even improve their lives. So they sacrifice their unborn child. This is no less abhorrent and detestable to God today than it was then.